Welcome to the Josh Button Podcast, where we discuss health, wellness, and outliers from society. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Josh Button Podcast. Today is episode 65, and I am joined with a fellow podcaster and author, John Solleder. He has a couple books you might want to check out on Amazon. They're both bestsellers. Moving Up 2020 and Leave Nothing to Chance, 15 Principles for Success. John, thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate the invitation.
I'm interested in several things that, come to mind about your bio, but let's get into it first. What's your background, your history, and what got you into writing?
Got me into writing. I studied communication in college, way back, graduated in 1983. And it was funny because Ronald Reagan was our commencement speaker when I graduated. And that man could communicate. He had this ability. There's about 4,000 people at this graduation ceremony. And I felt like he was talking to me personally. And I said, anything I can do to communicate at 100th of the level that he did, I'm going to do in my life. And I'm going to communicate, good messages, positive messages, messages that help people, be it financially, pretty much my focus financially, but, other aspects of their life, be it health, be it nutrition, be it working out, be it whatever it is that they're, so inclined to have some interest in. And if I know something about it, I'm going to communicate it to them. Doesn't make me an expert necessarily in every area. Nobody is, but I know something about it. And I'll just give an example. It's snowing here in Dallas today, as I shared with you. So I became a Wim Hof advocate a few years ago, 4 years ago. I started jumping in the cold every day. And of course, living in a hot climate, I've got a refrigerator during the summer months that I have to use. I'm more like a hunter's freezer that I freeze and all. But I did that today, and I posted that on Facebook just for fun. And the comments from people and the questions and, anything that you can communicate that is a game changer for someone, you do. And they'll figure out whether it's for them or not, whatever it happens to be. But I decided I wanted to be a good communicator. And I'm not an overly religious guy, but when I read the Old Testament a number of years ago, I read it cover to cover and took notes on it. I found a great piece of scripture from Solomon. And of course, Solomon was considered to be the smartest man that lived during the time period that he lived. And he used to say, accurate communication allows progress. And when you think about that statement, be it then thousands of years ago, or be it today, if you're clear with people and you communicate well with people, you can guide them and you can be honest with them. And maybe you're honest with them on something that is not necessarily good news for them. Okay. But at the end of the day, at least they're clear on what they need to do to maybe change some paradigm in their life to move forward. So I wouldn't say I'm a master of communication, but I became really good at it. I started writing way back back in high school, actually. I started writing and didn't know what I would do with it. I really thought I wanted to be a sports journalist way back when I was in school. And I got offered my first job to be at a wrestling magazine in Delaware. I was at a tournament. I was competing. I was talking to this guy, and he said, I own this magazine, and he offered me a job. But it was $12,000 a year. And I owed $35,000 on my school loan. So I pretty much figured out that writing for a living wasn't what was going to pay the bill. So I got into sales. But I enjoy writing. I enjoy communicating. And of course, today it's changed because today it's not just the written word in books, but it's everything that we do online. Everything from doing what we're doing right now, podcasting, to building YouTube channels, to, communicating with, with TikTok or the other medias that exist. So anyway, I'm a firm believer in communication, accurate communication, and that communication can give guidance to me.
Yeah, what a funny, interesting time to be alive when there's people that are getting censored for some information that's not necessarily comfortable, but was necessary. And we've come to find years after COVID began that they were truths. So it's much needed in the world. It's always been much needed, but probably now more than ever. So you wrote this book, Moving Up, during 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yep. This one came out, this Moving Up 2020. And the title, the idea was 2020 has a couple of different meanings, as we know. One was obviously the year, right? And the turn of a decade from, 2019 to 2020. Secondly was the idea that, clear eyes, right? 0, 0. Okay. And thirdly was the fact that, 2020 was going to be this year of dramatic changes going on in the world. New president coming in, new administration coming in. That turned out to be a disaster, in my opinion, but that's another story. But there was changes going on. So I wrote this thing basically with the idea that there was changes coming. And within my industry of direct selling, that I could share some stories of some of my colleagues that have been successful, things that they had overcome. But more than anything else, that I could give some of the strategy and tactics that had helped me become very, very successful in the network marketing space. So that was the idea of the book. We get it printed late November, around Thanksgiving. And I'm living in Canada at the time still. My son's still up there going to school, playing hockey. And we start to hear this rumor about something going on in China. But, you hear all kinds of stuff, right? As we all do. Every day, I'll turn on the news, you hear something, right? Well, meantime, I had started this book a couple of years before with a co-author in Canada. So I'm finishing this book. So I'm like, look, let's launch this one right after the holidays, and let's launch this one in February or March. And even though they're going to kind of run into each other, they're inexpensive, right? You can't afford $15-20 for a book. You better buy the book, that type of thing. And I'm like, okay, great. And I've got this full agenda. I'm speaking in Montreal, Toronto, London, Paris. Where else was I going? Amsterdam, all over Europe. Coming back here, going all over the States, or down Orlando. I was booked to do a thing for a direct selling company. Supposed to speak at a couple of conventions. And all of a sudden, around the last week of January, first week of February, we started hearing, well, hotels aren't going to allow meetings. Well, great, there goes my audience. Because I'm used to standing in front and, selling. And, a lot of people bought online, but we'd always bring, a couple hundred books with us that we could sign and all that. Well, there goes my audience. So I'm like, what am I going to do? I have to pivot. And I was on the Old Mandino, World's Greatest Salesman podcast that a guy named Dan McCormick was doing at the time. And we finished the call, and Dan says, you want to start a podcast. Now, this is prior to COVID. So all of a sudden, I'm thinking, oh, Dan's right. Thus podcasting. Like yourself, it's like, this didn't exist a few years ago, but now I believe, and I love your thoughts on this, Josh, with you doing so many of these. And I love your show, by the way. I've become a big fan. I believe this is the new media that people are going to listen to, because be it MSNBC to the far left, be it Fox to the semi-far right, be it CNN, whatever they are, hard to figure. If those are your three sources of news, you're not getting accurate news necessarily, or you're getting what they want to give you with an opinion based on whoever's paying them, whoever owns those stations, whatever their politics are. And what happened during this election is Donald Trump, love him or hate him, leave your politics out for a minute if you're a business person, and say he did something really, really smart. He got on hundreds, if not thousands, of podcasts with guys like us and said, look, here's who I am. You may not like me, but here's what I'm going to do. Here's where the world's at. Here's where our country's at. Love it or don't love it, here's what I'm going to do. He's very, very clear. Going back to communication, right? Accurate communication allows progress. Very clear on what he intends to do. Whereas, Mrs. Harris got on about 4 podcasts, one of which was about sex or something. It's like, who cares? I mean, I don't even know if those people vote. And I think when we get around to 2028, we're going to see the candidates in both parties that are going to be very, very enthused to talk to guys like yourself and say, hey, Josh has thousands of people listen to him. Let's get on and tell what we're going to do. And, some of those people are going to like it and vote for me. Some aren't. But this kind of, if you will, long form podcasting, I think is going to replace a lot of media. And it's doing it already, but I think it's going to do it in a big way. There's statistically 3.8 million English speaking podcasts going on a monthly basis now. And I think that number will probably accelerate into the, tens of millions by that time. And not because of politics, about other things, any number of subjects, but you have an audience of voters. They're going to want to hear because it's their country, So, yeah, I'm excited about podcasting. I think it's definitely the communication medium that exists today that is driving lots and lots of things, including new business startups.
Absolutely. And perhaps you touched on something there, 2020. Maybe we should be thankful for that administration and all the errors that they made during that time, and the COVID failure that we've all seen firsthand, and would open more eyes and minds to alternative media or to other people that are bringing something to the table that's either being censored in the mainstream or directly disputed and talked down upon, that's turned out to actually help a lot of people. Timing is inevitable.
I couldn't agree more, because I'm one of those guys that was listening to Bobby Kennedy during that time period, and I was listening to David Avocado Wolf, and I was listening to other people in the health world, if you will, who were saying, "Hey, don't run out and take this jab. Like this thing's not proven. These guys haven't done their homework. They're rushing this thing." And to that point, now we're seeing the ramifications of that. Unfortunately, I'm seeing it in friends and relatives. You probably are too. I personally didn't take the jab. For what's that worth? I'm sure some of your listeners did. And hey, it was a tough decision. In some cases, you couldn't work if you didn't take the jab. So you really didn't have a choice in the matter. So respect everybody's wishes to do what they did. But if those people weren't out there, following blind authority is not something we should do. It's okay to ask questions. As Americans, we should always ask questions, and we shouldn't just blind trust, right? The American Indians blind trusted us at one time. What did we do? We gave them blankets with diseases on them, right? Other cultures have come to our country that we've done things to that are horrendous because they just followed us on blind faith, right? So even as Americans, don't listen to everything. Doesn't mean you need to agree with everything, but certainly listen to it. And once again, thing is, part of that is to listen to what people have to say, and can they back it up with facts, with evidence, with evidence-based science? Great. And I found out they could, so I made a personal decision that I didn't take the jab. My wife didn't take the jab. My kids didn't take the jab. My sisters both did. I have friends that did. Well, we disagree on that, but at the end of the day, they made their choices. I made mine. We need the alternative. We need the alternative voices. And sometimes, by the way, that's not necessarily coming from the quote unquote medical establishment, because the medical establishment brought this to us. And look what happened.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of families are divided on the issue still, but are now seeing firsthand the things that people warned against, the things that people were afraid could potentially happen. And now more and more experts that were on the side of the preventative / intervention are now coming along and saying, hey, we might have rushed out a bit. And maybe perhaps all along, there was even some malicious, forced experimentation done on the public because they wanted to get the results or whatever the end game was for it. People have witnessed it now. So I think a lot of eyes have opened up to all right, let's process things that are coming, even if they're coming from the authority figures or from the industry who's making the most off of this situation, and give it a little bit of time.
Well, as a side note to that, my main business is with a product that elevates glutathione. And one of the researchers that had worked with our product way back, I'm talking way back, was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Luc Montagnier. And he was at the Pasteur Institute. And he was considered to be the world's leading epidemiologist, and for years. And matter of fact, he won the Nobel Prize. He co-owned, got the Nobel Prize with Dr. Gallup from the U.S. here on the HIV virus. This was back in the 80s. And I'm like, before I consider taking this stuff, let me hear what Dr. Montagnier is saying about it. And he was the one that said, it's going to split, it's going to morph. You're better off not taking it. And once again, make your own decision, right? You're over 18, make your own decision. But at the end of the day, he was like, I am not taking it personally. Boy, did he take flack.
Yep. He was censored. He was censored heavily.
Big time. And he passed away since, but he was 89 when he passed away. Montagnier was who I listened to because I'm saying, well, who knows more about this type of thing than he does? And who's seen more for 60 years than this guy has? I'm sorry, my local doc doesn't have that level of experience. might mean well and might say, hey, well, here's what they're telling me, and here's what I'm telling you, and you should take it. So that, they were in a bad predicament too, unfortunately, the local medical doctors, and they're not the enemy, but there's an underlying thing when there's a lot of profit to be made. You better look at the source of who's making that profit, and do they have your best interest in mind? And I think in this
Absolutely.
case, there was a lot of profit made by a lot of people that Kennedy exposed and will be exposing more in the next 4 years, thank God, that frankly profited by this type of thing financially. My question is always, okay, are these always tests where they're testing us to see what the pushback was? Oh, they didn't push back too hard on this. What are they going to do next? So I think the awareness is up. And then once again, coming back to what we're talking about a little bit as far as communication, this is why you need to listen to a lot of information. Doesn't mean you need to buy it all, but it means you need to at least be informed and not just go, well, this is what my favorite TV person says. Okay, who's
Yeah,
paying the salary?
100%. I couldn't agree more. We needed more and more information in the marketplace, and I think that that's one of the reasons the censorship arm came down in the way it did, and why we were actually so. I guess you would have to be oblivious to what was going on in the world not to see the censorship, and that should raise a lot of question marks with people, as it were. Tell me, did you find Wim Hof during COVID?
I found this is, you love this, right?
What's that?
You're going to love this story. Okay. We had Snowmageddon here, they called it. 4 years ago, 4 years ago, in a couple of weeks here. Crazy. I mean, it was insane. It was like it snowed the snow, freezing cold. I grew up in the Northeast. My wife is French Canadian. We lived in Canada. We're used to that weather. It doesn't even bother us, honestly. But it bothers you when you don't have the snow boots and snow tires and all the other stuff. So anyway, we get this crazy weather. So my pool starts to melt, and I'm out there with my son fooling around with a couple of hockey sticks, passing the puck back and forth on our pool because it's novel. I mean, we live in Texas. Our pool is frozen. We can play, we can play sticks on the ice in our backyard. I mean, so we're filming all of this stuff. I wind up falling in the pool, and I got out, and right away went and took a hot shower. Real quick, I realized, you know what? I feel good. I'm expecting to feel bad. I'm like, oh, I feel pretty good. And a friend of mine in California had mentioned this Wim Hof guy a couple of times. And I thought he was referring, actually, like the Winnebago trucks. For some reason, I made a connection between Wim and, I didn't make the connection. This was a human being he was talking about. So I'm watching Brian Gumbel's show, his Real Sports show. And while I'm watching it, all of a sudden, he goes, we're going to our next subject. There's this crazy guy from Holland. He climbs mountains in his shorts in the middle of winter. And I'm going, he's got to be talking about. So the next story comes on. This was February of 2025 years, actually, next one. And anyway, so he comes on, Hoff comes on, and he's climbing mountains, and he's running marathons in his shorts, and he's got the camera crews in their parkas, and he's got the guy who's doing the story on him finally jumps in the river with them over in Amsterdam. And I'm like, I got to find out who this guy really is. So, of course, I go online like everybody else. I buy his course. I buy his book. I buy, download all his audio stuff. And I start reading the science because I start with the science always, evidence-based science. I'm used to reading scientific data. And I start reading it. I'm like, hey, this guy's onto something. And the studies that were done are solid, and they're coming out of very well-respected places, both in Holland and throughout Europe. And I just became a Hoffer right then and there. I was like, what, I'm going to do it. So I've bought a lot of women's stuff. Have not missed a day. When I travel, sometimes it's got to be real cold showers. Drive my wife nuts if she gets in the shower after me, by the way. But I'll have ice cubes, in the shower with me if I have to. My hands and my feet, because I played a lot of judo when I was younger, so my extremities are kind of beat up here, my wrists and things. I've always got my hands at least 3 minutes a day in ice cubes. Got something that he does in one of his courses. Okay, sometimes I do my feet too, but my hands in particular, my wrists. Today with the snow and the ice, I'm out in the pool. taking videos. So I'm a firm believer. There's a great book on ice swimming, by the way, written by a Danish doctor. I've got it somewhere here in my office that I read also. So I've been doing some ice swimming. Love to get out there. The colder, the better. Hop in the pool and just go. It's like you can't wait. As you know, you got to get in the cold and go. You can't just get there and literally freeze. You got to move if you got to do ice swimming. So doing some of that. I mean, I'm probably the slowest swimmer on the planet, but I don't do it for that. I do it for the therapy, and just definitely helps my inflammation. But it also helps with something else, Josh, and that's you do this early in the morning. 5, 6 in the morning when it sets the tone for the rest of the day. Because what are you going to do realistically that's more difficult? Not a lot. So it gives you that mental edge. And I think that's why so many people, from celebrities to pro athletes to CEOs to anybody that's high performance, like you are, like I am, they do it because it helps to set that tone for everything else in their life. And of course, there's a gazillion other benefits to it from a physical standpoint. But to me, it's more the mental part.
I couldn't agree more. I love it. I'm a complete maniac, if that's what you want. I've got the chest freezer out back, and I do the ice baths every day, do a workout after the ice bath, train jujitsu in the morning. I actually met and worked with Wim Hof in LA probably 7, 8 years ago now. And that breath work alone, and then the knowledge and what he was saying, it just, at that time, it made sense. But until I had done it for a year or two, it didn't really set into how important it was, what I was really accomplishing. And the mental aspect, like you mentioned, is probably the most beneficial thing. Nobody wants to go on the ice. Nobody wants to put their body into 30 to 40 degree water and turn off their mind and shut down their response and just sit there or do what they're going to do in it for the 3-4 minutes a day. Nobody wants that. It's the results that you want. Until you felt the results and you go and you do it, it just won't make sense for sure. And I don't think we could list the benefits all in one podcast even. Like, we probably have different experiences and different environments and different ways that we've gone and done something that we wouldn't do because we did that.
And you're absolutely right. And I'd even take it one step further. When I read that book from the doctor in Denmark, she made a great point. Before modern plumbing, everybody went in cold water. If you wanted to be clean, what did you do? You found a brook, a creek, a lake, an ocean, depending where you lived, and might have been every third day, but you went in just to get the off your body, right? And then all of a sudden we get modern convenience. And what does modern convenience do? Modern convenience has made us weak, make our immune systems weak, make our bodies weak, right? So, what Wim's done, and you've met Wim. I've never had the privilege of meeting him. I hope to at some point. But, what he's done is he's just brought something out once again. And like he says, I didn't invent anything. I just found this, and it worked for me because of what happened with him, with the wife and his circumstance. But you talk to so many people. I mean, I got on a call. I don't remember who organized the call, whether it was through him. It must have been through him. I get on and I'm talking to a guy just like we're talking, like, pre-call. And I noticed this very British accent. I start talking. Nice guy. Finally says, "What's your name?" I said, "John." He said, "What's your name?" He goes, "Russell." I'm talking to Russell Brand. He's going to be his guest. He's there early for the show. We're the only two guys on, about 10 minutes to the show. I'm talking to, I get off the call. My wife's like, "What were you doing?" I go, "Well, I was talking to Russell." She goes, "Russell, who are you?" I have a cousin named Russell. I go, "Russell Ranch." Come on. I'm like, I'm serious. I didn't have my phone. I should have taken it. You know what? Really down to earth guy. But once again, the benefits that he's gotten, again, he was heavily into drugs and all that, Hollywood lifestyle, which he's not anymore. He's doing great. But, how it's helped him and helped, just so many people. And once again, you know what? A lot of these things don't cost money. Going in the cold doesn't cost you anything, I'm a firm believer, and I've turned a lot of people onto it that, come back and thank me. I said, "Don't thank me, thank Wim, because he's the guy that made it popular, but it just makes common sense, and I'll do it the rest of my life. Firm advocate of it.
Yeah, resiliency training. So you were a judo player. How long did you train?
Oh, forever. I started out, started wrestling when I was 9. I started judo initially when I was about 13, 14. And I gave it up really, really for wrestling. And I broke my back playing football. So then I had to give up everything for a couple of years. And then in college, I started playing judo again in New Jersey with a guy named Ogasawara. He was my sensei there. And earned my black belt under him in 1992 from the Kodokan over in Japan. I retired as a third degree black belt in judo, but I picked up Brazilian jiu-jitsu along the way. The Machado family, you're a jiu-jitsu guy. The Machados moved here. Carlos did anyway. Got jiu-jitsu really started here in Dallas. So, of course, eventually we kind of, cross-ventilated judo and jiu-jitsu here. Judo guys started doing jiu-jitsu and vice versa. Initially, there was like this big pushback, and I was like, guys, it all comes from the same place. Okay, I mean, Helio Gracie would be the first to tell you that, and so would Jigaro Kano if they were alive. It'd be like, it's the same thing, guys. Do it. It's all good. And then so I got my just first degree in jiu-jitsu, and then I got into sambo. Believe it or not, I was very successful in sambo. My first sambo match was way back in '83. I was still in college. And I was going to get out of college, and I competed in the nationals in sambo, and I liked it. Then it kind of died. It kind of disappeared in the U.S. And then, believe it or not, some guys in Quantico that were with the FBI, they had gone over to the Soviet Union or Russia now, and started to learn this hand-to-hand combat. And they were judo guys, so they started learning this hand-to-hand combat from the Russians. A guy named Dave Brzezinski. Dave's in the U.S. Wrestling Hall of Fame, and tied Dan Gable, believe it or not, 1968 Olympic trials in wrestling. I mean, that's how good Dave was, a two-time NCAA champ at Temple University. But Dave gave me my first actual sales job in a Nautilus. Remember the old Nautilus equipment? So he gives me my first sales job. And one day we're talking. He goes, I'm well in wrestling. You're really good in judo. You're better built for judo than you are wrestling. After the back operation, I couldn't take a low shot anymore. So judo, I didn't have to shoot. You know what I mean? I could work all upper body. And anyway, he says, let me start teaching you sambo. And there's two real good lessons here for your listeners, Josh. One is that Dave, even though Dave was a world-class athlete, Dave was also a world-class student. Dave brought out his notebooks of what the Russians had taught him about sambo. Everything from pictures that he drew with actual technique, okay, and very, very detailed. And he started teaching me sambo. And the second thing was Dave became a very successful businessman because he was also disciplined from wrestling, judo, sambo, etc. The lesson in that is just that, sambo was fun, but I learned another thing. It was actually the largest clinical trial of humanity ever done, because they took the best techniques of Japanese judo from the Kodokan, the best techniques of wrestling, which is really, Russia, United States, Iran, three big wrestling powers. They kind of put it together, and they kind of came up with 1,024 separate techniques. Now, you're never going to learn that in a lifetime, but that's what they came up with. And of course, the Soviet military and police force, that's what they use to disable somebody. Okay, now it gets so much rougher than it does in the sport aspect of it. In the sport aspect, you have rules, and the street aspect, it's like Krav Maga. I mean, it meant to disable or kill somebody. But yeah, it was great. So I did that for a number of years off and on. And, sambo kind of went like this in the U.S. It's kind of like it had a following. These FBI guys were growing the sport, and they got old. Some of them passed away or retired. They stopped doing it, and it kind of died down again. And so where it is right now, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I'll be 64 this year, so my days of rolling and banging heads on the mat are pretty much over, unfortunately. But I did get into bench press competitions in my old age. That's what I do now. I do bench press competitions, and I occasionally throw shot put and discus. I've been blessed to have so many mentors, and that's another point for your audience. And like, Dave was a mentor, obviously, in sambo, Ogasawara in judo. In powerlifting, one of the first people in the world that ever bench pressed 1,000 pounds happened to have moved here to North Texas. When I start lifting, I wind up lifting with this guy. I could have went to a million gyms. I went to this guy's gym. He starts teaching me how to bench properly, right? Which, somewhat helped my shoulders, right? So I've been doing that, fooling around with that the last few years. Then I'm out throwing a shot put one day and having no idea what I'm really doing, just kind of using pure leg drive and throwing the thing. Guy walks by, says, I can show you how to throw that better. Okay. Well, it turns out this guy named Scott Erickson has got to been an Olympic alternate in the discus in '84. Gone to Michigan, 3-time Big Ten champ in discus and shot put. Still has sets all the world records every year in the shot put and discus in the world. Still, he's in his 60s now. So I've always been lucky to find these people who go, "Hey, you want to do this? Let me just show you how to accelerate the process." So I've been blessed with that. And always open to it. That's something else for your listeners. Be open to being mentored. You're not going to know it all. And I don't care if look, if you're a great wrestler, and we've seen this with UFC, a lot of great wrestlers got into the UFC and got their butts handed to them. And they're probably better athletes sometimes, but they don't know how, for example, to defend a choke initially. And they'll walk in and they'll shoot, and all of a sudden the guy chokes them out. And it's like, what happened? I'm an NCAA champion. And who was this guy? Well, you got to learn the game. You got to learn the other man's game, So mentorship is so important in anything that we do. And being willing to be mentored is the real point.
You are quite the Renaissance man, sir. You touched on a point that's very important to me, being a lifelong student and being able to succeed, if not be the best, in several different disciplines. And I know a lot of people are into specialists, be a specialist, just really hone in on one thing and perfect it. But for me, myself, that's just never really been the way I operated. I would have interest in different disciplines, different things that, would come across my plate, would just, arouse my curiosity, make me want to jump into it, and why not pursue it? I'm only here once, and if it's interesting to me, I'm going to give it a go.
Exactly, and I love it. You and I are the same. We get along great. We get in all kinds of trouble together.
Yeah, I think that's the reason the podcast really happened for me as well. I knew I wanted to do one a while back, but initially my first thought was, okay, I'll just have mentors from all different disciplines that I'm interested in that come onto the show and, really give me insight into their world. So I'm at least getting that understanding of things and, hopefully helping an audience who's looking for the same kind of insights, the same things. Maybe it'll trigger some kind of radical behavior or radical exercise on somebody's behalf that they wouldn't have before. Tell me this, with resilience.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, with resiliency training, that like when you're wrestling, when you're doing a martial art, you're obviously put in positions where you're uncomfortable all the time, and you have to increase your adaptability to those discomforts. So do you believe that's like one of the reasons you like the ice and the Wim Hof as well?
Yeah, big time. You got, we as Americans are so spoiled. The rest of the world doesn't necessarily have 3 meals a day. They have what they have. We're so spoiled that we take everything for granted. We have to challenge ourselves because we're so spoiled. Going in the ice, to your point, fun. I mean, this morning I knew it was going to feel like needles cutting me because it was going to be cold, windy, and it's snowing and raining at the same time. But you go, because you know that putting yourself uncomfortable will make you comfortable. There's that old saying: the World War II generation came back. Those were men. Okay, and some of those boys left here, boys 16 and 17, lied on their birth certificates, and they came back as men at 20, 21, 22 years old. And they built companies like AIG, for example, and so many others, Ross Perot, and all the great guys that came out of that generation as business leaders and thought leaders, Earl Nightingale, on and on. What did they do with their sons in a lot of cases? Well, I did all this hard stuff, so you don't have to do anything. And then we created this generational thing of weakness. Well, now all of a sudden we're being challenged. The rest of the world's challenging us financially, education. If you're an engineer in Bangladesh, you got the same education some kid that went to Stanford has. Well, that kid thinks he's worth $300,000. The kid in Bangladesh will work for $20,000. That's who you're competing with. AI is a great equalizer. Okay, for the world, not just for Americans. So you got to get tough. You got to get smart. You got to get articulate. You got to figure out what to do as biohacks, okay, for your health, but also for your mind. You got to be reading, not watching so much TV. Read, listen, learn from thought leaders constantly. Like, I follow a reading list of Elon Musk. Why? Because to me, he's the smartest guy on the planet. Okay. There's other guys smarter at other things. But if you say generically, he's probably the smart. If you sat down with him, there's probably 15 topics that he knows more than anybody else on the planet. Well, I'm going to read what he's reading. I'm not going to read a trash novel. Why would I waste my time? You know what I mean? Why would I eat a half digested sandwich somebody threw in the garbage if I could go and buy a full one at Subway, right? I mean, like, this is the way that we have to start thinking again as Americans, is that we're competing with the rest of the world. But the number one person you compete with every day is who? The guy in the mirror. Okay. So I can't come to your house. Josh can't come to your house. Wim Hof can't come to your house. Elon Musk can't come to your house and say, get up now, get to work, start getting the skill sets, start refining what you're doing, start sharpening the iron. And we have to do that. I tell my son this all the time. You are living in a super competitive world, young man. If you think it's going to be easy, you're delusional. Okay. It's not going to be easy. It's not supposed to be easy. You're supposed to be challenged. You're supposed to ask questions, right? That's how we have to be. And that's why, by the way, I've spent my whole life being that way because I've always been an underdog. I've always been a guy who starts to achieve and then something happens. I'm a real good athlete in high school. All of a sudden, get hit in the back playing football, double spinal cord operation, knocks me out of my senior year. Well, there goes any scholarships, right? Well, fortunately, I used this. I went to college anyway. It was like, okay, I'm not going on a football scholarship. All right, I'll go on an academic scholarship. Well, I got a partial one, and the rest we had to pay for it. But the point is, I was willing to do the work, and that's what we have to be able to do and willing to do is do the work, whatever it happens to be it martial arts, be it business, be it podcasting, be it reading, be it being an engineer, being a doctor, being a lawyer, whatever that we want to be in life, we have to be willing to do the work and jump in with both feet. Don't be looking at your watch. You know what I mean? It's like people who look at watches, they're employees. You're not going to get anywhere like that. The tax code destroys you. These guys in Washington figured out a long time ago, long before you and I. These don't do well. Entrepreneurs do. Why does the entrepreneur get the tax break? Because he creates business revenue via taxation by employing people. So don't be looking at your watch. How many hours does it take to do the job? Whatever it takes to do the job is the right answer. Not, well, I can do it in 4 hours. Well, can you do it right in 4 hours? No, but I'm going to charge you for 4 hours. Don't charge me for 4 hours. Charge me to do it right. I mean, it's just philosophy in terms of how we deal with people to get ourselves, number one, and other people on our teams. If we're building teams of people, we all build teams, right? You got a team working with you with your podcast and the other things you're doing. I got teams working with me on a variety of different business ventures. Say, hey, if you're leading a team, you lead yourself first. Then you lead the team.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are in the middle of still an opioid pandemic, a drug crisis, but comfort is probably the worst and most affluent drug in our society and in the U.S. especially. You touched on that, and it hits home in so many different areas. And I'm sitting here listening to what my friends and family or friends and associates are going through in California right now with these fires, and I realize, my goodness, they've put the wolf in charge of the hen house. They really have. They've got these people that are obviously not going to be the best versions of themselves, and you can blame DEI, you can blame politics and voting and all this other stuff, but bottom line is somebody's not taking responsibility, and somebody has really, really set their friends, their family, their neighbors up for disaster. In the United States, of all places, where, this is the last place it should happen. But I think you touched on something that really is the only thing that makes sense to me. And that is, people are comfortable. People are clocking in, clocking out, and they're just doing what the bare minimum they have to do to get by. And some of them are even gaming the system to get put into positions they don't really deserve. The meritocracy has somewhat of a failure here, or has kind of failed in the ways that we've bypassed the meritocracy.
Well, Jim Collins, not to interrupt you, Josh, but Jim Collins, right, author of Built to Last and Good to Great, amongst other books. Big fan of Jim's. He talks about the difference between a watch and a timepiece, and he equates the watch versus Big Ben, right? What are you building? And that's what people have to look at in their lives. What am I building? Am I building something that is generational for myself and my family, right? And if I pass away for my heirs, right, to be taken care of, et cetera, am I building something? Most of the time it's a business, sometimes it's something else. But that legacy, am I building that? Or am I just going through my 40 years to get a paycheck, to do okay? We no longer, in America, is not doing okay anymore. We have fallen behind in healthcare, to your point, way behind in healthcare, way behind in education. Ask a young person to do math. Go in and buy something at 7-Eleven and hand a $50 bill to the cashier if they're under 21 and watch them struggle with the change, right? Ask a young woman to sew something. Okay. They can't. Now, maybe this is the old guy in me, but when I was growing up, we took shop class as guys and the girls took home economics. And sometimes they did cross over where a kid would say, hey, you know what? Nothing wrong with the girl knowing how to do, the industrial arts stuff, and nothing wrong with the boy knowing how to, cook an egg or sew on a button on his shirt. We don't teach any of that anymore. We're too busy teaching people about sex education and changing identities. What does all this have to do with who you're going to compete with? Because the people you're competing with, I have a buddy who's a martial artist, actually started Dojo TV way back. He was like the forerunner to Joe Rogan, guy over in Manila named Chris Thomas. He's originally from Baltimore. And I started Chris yesterday. And he's married to a Filipino girl. He's got 4 kids under the age of 7. These kids already read and speak 3 languages. They're not going to school learning all this nonsense. They're going to school. They're learning stuff that, okay, they're going to be dealing with the Chinese. So they're learning Mandarin. They're learning English because they're going to be dealing in English. And there's the language in the Philippines besides the native language. And of course, the native language, Tagalog. And they'll be adding on 2 more languages over the next few years as they get older. Okay, now put that against an American kid, right? Well, the fault is not the child. You can't blame a kid. The kid doesn't know any better. Kid's going to do what they're told. That's what kids do. We got to lead that. And we got to tell our authority figures in Washington, in state government, in local government, hey, we want our kids to be smart so they can compete with the rest of the world. Because otherwise we are going to fall apart as a country if we don't do that. And I hope this next administration does it. I'm optimistic that they will. But 4 years goes by real quick. It needs to be a philosophical change in all of us, Democrat, Republican, independent, libertarian, where we start thinking, hey, to John Kennedy's point, don't ask, what it's going to do for your party. Ask what it's going to do for our country. And that's what we got to get back to. And I think there's a lot of people feeling this way, by the way. Not everybody, but I think there's a lot of people, that are thinking about, and saying, hey, we better get back to basic fundamentals because we're getting passed by the rest of the world.
Do you think that might be one of the underlying reasons that Trump has reached out and has expanded? He's got RFK, he's got Vivek, he's got Elon, he's got these, thought leaders of the left. He's got people that were never considered, to the right in his administration, in his cabinet, or what will be in positions to maybe eliminate the Department of Education, do these other things that could be leading us in that direction.
Yeah, I think so. I think what he's trying to do, like any good CEO, and he's one of the best, I think he's philosophically saying, just like Lincoln did many years ago, the people who oppose me, I need their opinion. I don't need a bunch of yes men telling me how smart and pretty I am. I need people telling me I'm full of what. Hey, that's not going to work because shoot holes and stuff. Because a good CEO, that's what he does, right? When you're spending your own money on a project or shareholder money, right? Which, he was spending his own money in his business and borrowed money in many cases that you're responsible for, right? So, people forget, they think they're voting for a person. You're not. You're voting for an office and you're voting for the CEO of your country. Why did I vote for Trump? Because I know he's a CEO. I know he's been one, and I know he was the first time around. Is he perfect? I don't know. I disagree with a lot of what he does and says. But at the end of the day, here's what I do know. He loves this country. He's got kids and grandkids that he's concerned with, more grandkids. Kids are all grown, right? He's looking at those young people and saying, if they are to have a future and compete in the world, not because they're coming from an abundance of wealth, which they are in his case, but the average kid, the kid that doesn't have Donald Trump as a grandpa, okay? for them to have a chance, we got to get the show back on the road here. Okay. And it starts with the education system. We got to start teaching people reading is reading, math is math, science is science, etc. We got to get back to the basic core fundamentals. And all of this politics that has somehow gotten involved in the education system has to stop, because we're inebriating these young people with things that aren't going to let them compete, because an employer is going to look at that down the road and say, well, that's great that you switch sexes, Billie Jean, and you used to be Bobby, and that's terrific. But what do you know? This kid over here speaks 5 languages fluently and could do AI projects in their sleep, and those trigonometry, calculus, and 14 other maths and 3 different computer languages. I'm going to hire him, okay, because he actually could do the job. Now, maybe Billie Jean is better, but Billie Jean has to be better at all those other things I just mentioned, or at least as good to get that job. And that job goes beyond the starter job. It also goes into the employment sector and the business sector. We need to develop the next level of entrepreneurs. You go back to that World War II generation. A lot of those guys started and grown up companies. They might be gone themselves, but those companies are still here. The insurance industry is loaded with a lot of insurance companies started by World War II vets, for example. A lot of real estate companies, a lot of construction companies, for that matter, that are still in existence, where, the founder's dead, but their heirs or whoever is running those companies. We need to do that all over again. We need to take this generation and turn them into entrepreneurs with the right education, so they're on a level playing field. And then let laissez-faire capitalism be what it is. Let it figure itself out. Somebody in another country is better at something, terrific. I'm hiring them. But we can compete with anybody in the world, but we got to want to compete with anybody in the world. And we've got to develop our people so that they know what the people they're competing against do. You're an athlete. I'm an athlete. You get on the mat. Referee says it's a 4-minute fight. Here's what you can do, boys. Here's what you can't do. You know the rules of the road. But if one guy comes out and he's got a baseball bat and you don't, he's got a big advantage. Let's stop giving the baseball bat to our opposition or to our competitors, and let's start leveling that playing field so that American business, American entrepreneurs, and American workers have the same opportunities of the people that they have to compete against in the world. I think that is what Trump's going to do, is he's going to level that playing field once and for all. Let's hope he does. I know he wants to, but it won't be easy.
Well, what's funny is people were up in arms like a week or two ago about that. Elon and Vivek, they were having some kind of conversation or debate about the HB1, whatever, the visas, and talking about the prerequisites for bringing people in and what these people were being hired for. And I think a lot of people got caught up in they're bringing in more immigrants when they were running on an anti-immigration thing, as opposed to, hey, look at what you're up against in the world marketplace as far as education and qualifications for jobs that you want the American people to restore, to take the lead in. You literally don't have enough people here that are qualified for the positions if you want to be the world leader in these various technical or even industrial companies.
Well, and let me say this, okay? I'm pro-immigration, but I'm pro-legal immigration. My wife is a legal immigrant to this country, okay? My oldest daughter is a legal immigrant to this country. Now, they happen to be Canadian, okay? But at the end of the day, they came. 3 years, they could not leave the country. It cost money, many, many visits to INS, and eventually, they were honorable people. They were granted their green cards. And their green cards are still citizens of Canada, but they live here in America. I'm all for that. And I think Trump and Vivek and Musk, Musk is a great immigrant himself.
Yeah.
I mean, for that matter, Vivek's parents are. So, Vance's wife is. Okay. So these people are not anti-immigrant. Donald Trump's wife is, for that matter.
Yep.
So they're not anti-immigrant. What they are is illegal immigrants who are coming to take from the system. If you are coming to contribute to America because you love what America stands for, let's roll out the welcome mat to those folks. But if you're here to cause problems, cause terrorism, steal from the American people, deal drugs, do the other things that we don't need more of, we got enough of our own bad actors, okay? We don't need to import them, then you're not welcome here. Go home.
Exactly.
And I think that's what he's going to do. So it's not a case of being anti-anybody. It's a case of being pro people who do the right thing. Now, are some of those people underprivileged that will help in the process? Sure, absolutely. all for that. But at the end of the day, it's got to be done right. And it can't be done with an open border. I travel all over the world. And I go to Mexico a lot. And I love the Mexican people. I've got a big business in Mexico. I've got a lot of friends in Mexico. But when I go to Mexico, they're very welcoming. But I fill out documents and they want to know, Mr. Solleder, how long will you be here and where are you staying? And what is the purpose of your visit? And I tell them, and they let me in every time, and they're an issue. And that goes for the Dominican Republic. It goes for Peru, Colombia. Okay. When I go to Europe, same thing. When I go to Germany, they want to know why you're here, who you're here to see. Are you here for business or something else? Countries are entitled to know who's in their country. We somehow think that we're being horrible human beings if we want to know, why are you here? What is your intention? So I think it's going to change. And I think logical people in both parties do see it that way. Okay. So I think things are going to change for the better in that respect.
I think even now in California, even if you want to see any silver lining from travesty like what we're witnessing, is that people are starting to understand there's a lot of illegal immigrants in that state that have voted. And because they do not require ID, they do not require any of these. They don't ask those questions in California. In California, you want to vote, you go in and you vote. And they've had a lot of people that for a long time have been demoralized with their voting system because they knew it wasn't showing the results of what they thought their friends and family and neighbors were trying to accomplish with their vote. So there's a silver lining to it there somewhere, I'm sure as well, and maybe more people.
Well, they made the Democrats made a huge miscalculation in regards to the Spanish population in our country. Because the Spanish people in our country, not everybody, once again, but they're religious.
Yep.
They go to church. They love their families. So when you start talking about things like late-term abortion and all of these other things, you're not appealing to them. They wouldn't think about doing something like that to a family member. So, what they thought was going to get all these people voting for them, they said, I'm voting for the other guy. Even though I may not like him, but I'm going to vote for him because he's talking about preserving life and everything else. So it's going to be an interesting 4 years. I think how much we know. And the other thing I think is that, if you go back to General Eisenhower, as one of our greatest presidents that people don't acknowledge that he was a great president as well as obviously being a great general. But, it's kind of a tradition when one president's leaving, another's coming in, they leave a note for the new guy. Like Biden will probably be leaving a note for Trump, I think. Okay. But it's tradition, right? And it's a good tradition. When President Eisenhower was leaving office and JFK had gotten elected, he wrote him a letter. And if you go to the Eisenhower Foundation, you can read this letter. And the letter was in reference to what he called then the military-industrial complex. That's now we're referring to as the deep state. That there would be bad actors internationally that for financial purposes would want to use the U.S. military ability, not only our military itself, but our ability to make armaments for their own personal financial gain. And now here's General Eisenhower. Here's a guy that between him and General Grant, President Grant, probably as our two presidents, saw more death and destruction than anybody. Firsthand, being in the roles that they were in. And both of those gentlemen hated it, because they saw what it did. Now they realize that sometimes, unfortunately, it does happen. And if it happens, win, okay, is what you need to do. And unfortunately, he wrote Kennedy this letter. Kennedy came down here to Dallas a short time after, and Kennedy said, hey, I'm going to be looking at the FBI, CIA, and these government agencies. Well, you know what happened. Okay. So, and my only point about that is, this is not new things. When we hear the deep state or we hear the military-industrial complex thrown around, this is not something that Donald Trump created or Elon Musk or Bobby Kennedy or whoever. This has been around since FDR, maybe longer. We did lend and lease with the British, for example, where we couldn't give them armaments, but we leased them to them. And we almost bankrupted England as a result, but that's another story. So this has been around for a while, where there's been financial gain by arming people. Well, sometimes we arm people that kill other people, and then all of a sudden we wonder why other people in other parts of the world are mad at us. Well, if that was my family, then you used a drone and you killed my family at a wedding and we were the wrong family and we were not terrorists. We were just a family and you misdiagnosed who we were and somebody did the wrong thing. I'm going to have a problem with that. I'm going to hate you. Okay. So some of this we've caused ourselves, and we have to look at that as Americans, at Americans, all political parties, and say, hey, you know what? We don't have to be the world's policeman and we don't have to be the world's arms dealer.
Yeah.
Okay. There is a time and a place where, unfortunately, World War II, we had to do what we did. And we did the right thing, in my opinion. Okay. But not every war since that we engage and we pick sides and we're selling this guy this and that guy that. Hey, man, we need to stop doing that. You know, we're not making friends. You know, we're not making friends and influencing people properly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So tell me, Immunotech, and that is your number one business, right? And what is the product? Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, 50 years ago, believe it or not, there was two scientists at McGill University, a guy named Dr. Gustavo Bunos and a woman named Dr. Patricia Kongshaven. And they were colleagues and friends, and they wanted to start to study the immune system to see if they could develop something for it. This was 1975, 50 years ago. By 1978, they had started to figure out that using a whey protein that they could actually build glutathione at the cellular level. And glutathione, for those people who are not familiar with it, glutathione is in every cell in our body, right? Like you can't, like God put it there, but it's primarily in your liver, it's in your lungs, it's in the whites of your eyes predominantly. So anyway, 78, they started to do some studies with it. They published the first research paper. Short time after that, Dr. Montagnier started to study what it did for HIV over at the Pasteur Institute. Another doctor, Dr. Droge, up at the National German Cancer Institute up in Heidelberg, Germany, he started to use it with some of his research. And they started to see that, hey, this stuff actually is doing something for the immune system. Well, if you're immune compromised, cancer, AIDS in particular, right? And now I would put the brain diseases in there, your Parkinson's, dementias, Alzheimer's, et cetera, that by building your immune system, your body's going to fight these things better. Does it mean you're going to live forever? No, but it means you're going to have a better quality of life. 6, they had 18 years of research on this stuff. They had already established patents in Canada, the United States, and several other countries with it, okay? And they said, okay, we can prove that we are the only supplement that will actually build cellular glutathione. Let's go to market. Now, it's hard to market something like that. You're not just going to stick it in Walgreens and people are going to come in and go, hey, let me give you $150 for a box of this stuff. They're not going to do that, okay? So they decided to go direct selling. So 3 entrepreneurs got together in Montreal. One, John Molson from the Molson Brewery family. They own the Montreal Canadiens, amongst half of Canada. I'm not sure what half he owns, but anyway, very wealthy family. And they were involved with the Montreal Teaching Hospital. So they started to say, okay, this stuff was developed by 2 McGill professors. Let's start to do a lot of research at the Montreal Teaching Hospital. So we furthered our research there. Fast forward, 96, they started a direct selling company. Late 96, my mother winds up being diagnosed with an immune disorder at a hospital in New York. A doctor there recommends, I asked the doctor, I said, is there something she can get on? Is there herb? Is there a vitamin? Is there, something? And the doctor hesitated for a minute. She said, I have a friend of McGill. And he developed a product, and my secretary's got a little bit of information. So she gave us an old 800 number on the back of a business card. And I get back here to Dallas, and I forget all about this for about 3 months. And I was supposed to order that stuff. Not thinking direct selling or business. I'm just thinking it's somebody selling a product. I remember like vitamins.com. It started back then, for example. I'm thinking it's one of those type of things, right? So I call the number. I order the product. My mother gets on it. She's on it for 3 or 4 months, and I'm paying for it on my credit card. So I call her one day, and I'm like, are you taking that stuff? Because I'm kind of like on an auto ship. She's like, yeah. She says, matter of fact, the doctor's really happy with my numbers. Okay. Well, maybe I should get on. So I decided to buy it. Well, then during the course of the conversation, I realized that it's a direct selling company. Well, I've been in direct selling since 1983. I've been vice president of one company, and I was top distributor with 2 other companies at that point. Lo and behold, I'm like, hey, you know what? You guys doing this direct sales, I'm probably your guy. You need to talk to me. Flew to Montreal. And anyway, we made an arrangement, and I decided to become a distributor for it. And that's what I've done for a living primarily. I mean, we've got other little businesses that we dabble in and own, but that's our main business is with Immunotech Research and Immunocal. And what's interesting, Josh, you'll appreciate this, especially being a martial artist, because we get hit in the head a lot. I've had 4 concussions. How many you had?
A good handful, but mine were actually from bike accidents and football, and had very few on the mats, thankfully.
I had 4 that way, and then I had one where a guy hit me in the head with a beer bottle, which I didn't appreciate. But he paid a serious price for that. But anyway, we started to study the brain a few years ago. We started doing some research out at the Eleanor Roosevelt Center at the University of Denver with a guy by the name of Dr. Dan Linsman. And, the brain is an interesting thing in many, many aspects, because as a kid, you get the concussion falling off the bike or off the swing set, right? As an adult, as we age, what do we worry about?
Hips
Dementia,
and yeah.
Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. And we're seeing, by the way, more and more of these things in general society, that people are getting diagnosed with these things left, right, and center. And some of that is that we are living longer due to modern medicine, right? I mean, so, our grandparents may not have died of it. Well, maybe they just didn't live long enough to develop it, is the thought, right? Well, anyway, Linsman starts to do this research, and we start to find that there are things that help, once again, with glutathione and the brain, as far as everything that I just mentioned. And once again, now, this isn't me talking. I'm a layman, okay? This is 91, as we speak, 91 patents on this product. We've got over 40 clinical trials we've done with this product. And it's a natural product, by the way. So that's my main business, and it's a product I fell in love with. A 28-year relationship with it. As my wife will tell me sometimes, you've lasted longer with Immunocal than you have with me. We're going on 24 years of marriage and 29 years with this product and this business. I'm still loving it. I love talking about it. And I love helping people with their health. And it's part of the big picture. Again, it's like, what I do with Wim, and, what I do with everything else in my life is geared towards good biohacks of stuff that makes sense. But I like that stuff to be backed up with science once again. And we got like, if any of your listeners are interested and you want to get in touch with me, I'm happy to send them, more information. But, we base everything on science. We don't, we're not telling stories with this stuff. We're backing it up with very well-respected institutions and researchers that have done our research.
Yeah. So how is glutathione processed, or how is it created? Is it from animal proteins? What's it from?
Starts out as milk. And then from the milk, basically, we process out just about everything except for whey. So the whey is the delivery system, basically, of the cysteine. Okay. Mm-hmm. And once that gets into our body actually builds. It's almost like, here's the analogy I give to people. If you were driving past a building site and you have bricks and you got mortar and you got wood and you got nails and hammers, etc., right? That's not a house. Those are the building blocks to build a house. Right now, bring in a contractor and he takes all that stuff and he turns it into a house. Well, same thing with our body. We take the Immunocal, okay, in the whey protein form, okay, and it delivers what we need to our body. So our body basically builds the glutathione and feeds all the cells in our body. And we've done some, I can't make claims for the product per se because it's a natural product. It's not a drug. And, sure you have some folks listening to this that would love for me to make all kinds of crazy claims. But what I can tell you is our science is second to none. It's been peer reviewed and peer reviewed and peer reviewed. We've done studies on autism now as well. There's not a lot we haven't studied. We've gotten very into the last few years into the athletic arena. Right there, right down the street from you there, Inter Miami uses our product. Your soccer team, for example, is one of many soccer teams around the world that are using our product. We had a number of athletes at the Paris Olympics that used our product. Well, why does an athlete use it? You see, an athlete's at the top of their, they got perfect bodies. There's nothing wrong with them, right? Well, how about recovery? How about during a training cycle, you get sick a lot? If you're cutting weight, some of the sports that we did, you got to make weight, right? Oh, I need to lose 12 pounds by next Tuesday for a weigh-in. You're depleting everything. You got to keep your immune system strong, once again. So we've gotten into that arena quite a bit, and we're getting into that more and more as the company, grows. So, something we're doing quite a bit of. And it's it's an interesting product. It's a product people should know about.
What is the delivery? Are they tablets?
No, it's whey protein.
So it's powder.
Yeah, that's that. I probably have a box right here. I'm like they do.
Let's see it. And what do? You mix up shakes or you mix it in with water?
You can mix it with water, mix it with juice.
Mm-hmm.
People who, for whatever reason, don't want to do it that way can mix it in applesauce or yogurt. It's envelope.
Got it. Are you do you take any other supplements?
I take a couple of other things. Yeah. I take a product called K21 that we also make. It's got rhodiola in it, which is good for blood oxygen levels when I train. Non-Immunotech products that I take a blue-green algae product from a company up in Oregon that's been making it for years up in Klamath Falls, Oregon.
Creatine?
I don't take a lot of creatine anymore. We do have one of our Immunocal products, our Immunocal Platinum product has a little bit in it, so I do take it that way. We have 3 different versions of Immunocal. That was the original one I just showed you there. So I take a little bit that way. I don't do too much anymore, okay, because frankly, I don't train that heavy anymore. When I used to train super heavy, I used to go a lot of creatine. Years ago, I actually worked with Dr. Volkov, who was the guy that wrote all the papers on it. 30 years ago, I knew him when he came over from the Moscow Sports Institute. But I don't use a lot of creatine anymore personally, but I'm a big believer in creatine for athletes and also for recovery.
So viewers and listeners, if they want to try this out, they want to learn a little bit more about it, where are they going?
You can go a couple of places. Probably your best bet is one of 2 things. Contact me at John Solleder, SOLLEDER 1, the number 1, at gmail.com. Or you can go to my YouTube, okay, which is basically my name _John _Solleder. You can go there. And I'll tell you what, I'm happy to even give people sometimes product to try for free, depending on their circumstance.
Well, we'll put all the contact information in the show notes for sure, but that's something else for people to look into, to check out for their own personal supplement benefits. But also, what advice do you have for individuals who are ready to meet the marketplace, who are going into business, who are going into sales, who are looking to be an entrepreneur? Like you mentioned, we need so much and are, taking that step, whether it be out of college or whether they've, been an employee for most of their life and now they're ready to redirect.
The best advice I can give them, okay, let me use an analogy that you and I both understand. You got to get your nose bloody. Okay, you can write all the fancy business plans you want, and I'm not against writing a business plan. But whatever business you're going into, it's refine and advance. Try something. Try it with some consistency. Don't try it once, right? Try something 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. If it's working, continue it and grow it. If it's not working, say, why is it not working? Let me refine it. Okay. Let me tweak it. In other words, let me take the screwdriver and, change the angle a little bit of something. Going into business is something everybody should do. We need to be entrepreneurial again in this country. Okay. Whatever you do. Like for me, it's network marketing. I got in it when I was a kid. I'm still in it all these years later. I've been very successful at it. If you like network marketing, great. But if you don't like network marketing, you want to start a machine shop, you want to start a auto dealership, you want to start a coffee brand, whatever it is, whatever your passion is what you got to do. Because you got to fall in love with what you do. This is the second thing that people miss. If you're not in love with what you do, you're not going to do it long enough. You won't go through the pain. If you and I didn't love martial arts, you would have went to one practice and like, this is hard. I've hurt the next day. Your body hurts. Your soul hurts. Your ego hurts. And you would say, I'm not going to do it. Well, but I really like it, so I'm going to go back. Well, sending business. Now, generally nobody beats you up physically, but you'll get beat up other ways, but you got to stay in there. And I use this analogy with my son who's got his own little business going, for example, and that's that you got to get your nose bloody. Okay. In other words, hey, you're going to have people say no. You're going to have people tell you crazy. You're going to have people tell you your product's too expensive, your service is too expensive, your whatever it is that you're marketing. And it's not right for whatever reason. So be it. If you know what's right, stay the course. Okay. And the other thing is you got to be consistent. You're going to build a business. You can't build a business every other Tuesday for 15 minutes. You got to live it. It's got to be part of your identity. Okay. It doesn't need to become you. This is something that people make a mistake about sometimes. I think it needs to become them. No, it doesn't. You got your family, you got your faith, you got other things. That's who you are. But your business has to be part of you. Okay. Immunotech became successful because it had a great product, but it had some great leaders. I happen to be the leader of those leaders. Okay. I was willing to lead. I was willing to fight. I was willing to spend money. I was willing to do things maybe that other people just said, that's too hard. Okay. Other businesses that I've been involved with that I've helped to grow over the years. Years ago, there was a company in Dallas that I helped here to get to almost 700 million in sales. The owner of that company, he was a tenacious guy and just tenacious, just never give up. Things didn't go his way, and he just showed up at work the next day. I mean, you see that in great entrepreneurs, okay? But a lot of great entrepreneurs, you're never even going to know their name, okay? But they show up every day. The guy running your local insurance agency that shows up every day, or the local realtor that's been there for years, they show up every day. They're consistent in what they do to get their name out, get their brand out, get their reputation out. So those are a couple skills. And there's other things they can read about in the book, by the way. There's some other stuff they can pick up there. And by the way, I didn't write these books just for network marketing. I wrote them for anybody that's in sales, frankly. There's things that you can do for any business that'll help you. The 10 penny principle as one quick example. Okay. Get you in a habit of talking to 10 people a day. Well, that sounds like a lot. Well, not really, but if you put 10 pennies in your left pocket and every time you have a conversation, you put one in your right, all of a sudden you get to 3 o'clock, you go, I talked to 10 people. I wasn't hurt. But if your mind tells you it's hard, it's hard. But if you go, hey, let me just do it, it's like jumping into cold again. You just do it and you get it over with and you move on in other aspects of your day.
Do you have a team of direct distributors? So do you tell them that? Or you're training them to do the same exact principles that you're teaching in the book?
Same principles. Same principles have built this company. Frankly, a lot of those principles have built a lot of companies because there's a lot of people that I mentored through the years that have gone off to other companies. One I talked to yesterday morning, he's got a team in a legal company that he's in, a legal product that he sells. He's got a team of 30,000 people. I mean, some of these guys have grown some huge teams and I didn't teach him everything, but I taught him some things that he applied to his business and been successful with, and, on and on and on. There's people all over the world that I've taught things, through network marketing, and some of them weren't big distributors in that particular company. Maybe I was training for at that time, but they went off and either started their own company or they became a principal, on the executive team, or they became a top distributor, Real proud of what we've done over the years.
Awesome, John. Awesome. Well, sir, I'm very grateful that you took the time to be with us today and to discuss all of this. You've absolutely been fascinating and educated quite a few different subject matter, that's for sure.
And it's great.
And if you had any parting words for us that you would like to share, obviously we were going to John_Solleder on YouTube. We're going to follow up and check out your product, and hopefully people are going to try it, and maybe you'll find a couple more distributors. You never know. Maybe you find some long life customers. Otherwise, which book are we going to first?
I'm moving up 2020. Okay, because I got more strategy in there than I do in the other. The other one's more a lot of interest stories, but moving up 2020, if you need strategy for your new business in 2025 or your old business in 2025, a lot of stuff in there.
Yes, sir. We will. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.